Before we get started today, I want to say a few words about the story you are about to hear. We don't often get the opportunity to learn about the process of changing the form of a local government. My three guests today, Jerry Andree, Toby Cordek, and Michael Foreman, were invited to work with a group of engaged citizens in Millcreek Township, Erie County, a community making its third attempt in 15 years to restructure their local government. What they helped create was remarkable. A government study commission that operated with discipline, integrity, and genuine civic passion. This episode is in many respects a rare masterclass in how to form a study commission and carry a recommendation through to the voters. But more importantly, it's a frank, insider conversation about the dynamics behind the scenes, including the interviews, the resistance, the attacks, and what it takes to stay focused and transparent when the process gets hard. And the work is not finished. We close the conversation today talking about the challenges of transition, including what still has to happen before Millcreek's new council manager form of government takes hold in January of 2028. Kurt Lewin, the founder of modern social psychology, once said, "If you really want to understand something, try to change it." In that sense, this is an episode that will interest anyone who truly wants to understand the role of local government, whether we are elected, appointed, or a member of the community. This podcast episode has been created in partnership with APMM, the Association for Professional Municipal Managers in Pennsylvania, to enhance learning, leadership development, and networking. Joining me today is Jerry Andree, who spent 3 decades as Township Manager of Cranberry Township in Butler County, Pennsylvania, and has been a steady presence in local government leadership across Pennsylvania. Even in retirement, he continues to teach, advise, and support communities working through complex challenges. Also with us is Toby Cordek, who served more than 35 years as town manager of McCandless in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, and has worked across nearly every aspect of local government. Today, he continues to mentor leaders and support municipalities through consulting and executive search work. And we're joined also by Michael Foreman, who brings over 30 years of experience with the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, where he advised municipalities on policy, finance, and operations. He now continues that work as a consultant, supporting local governments across the region. You can learn more about our guests by checking out the show notes. I asked Jerry Andree to get us started today by explaining what makes Millcreek Township different in its current form. Let's get started. Jerry, if you could explain what that difference is, how Millcreek Township operates in a way that is different from most municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania and probably in other states as well. Can you explain its structure and how it functions differently than most?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Millcreek, since its inception, has been governed by a 3-member board of supervisors. And historically, they then appoint themselves to be full-time administrators, municipal administrators of the municipality. And they've done that for decades. And that's more traditional in Erie County. Erie County has a small number of council manager forms of government, so that's really all they have known are what they call working township supervisors. It's only about an hour and 45 minutes from my community that I serve, Cranberry Township, and I got to know the Millcreek supervisors over many years ago. I was pretty involved with PSATs as well as my board members. So I've got to know many of their township supervisors over that period of time, and we're always exchanging notes and collaborating in some way. So there's a long history of a relationship between Cranberry Township and Butler County and Millcreek and Erie County.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. And PSATS is the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. It's a statewide association that does encompass those second-class townships. Toby, did you want to say something?
And what makes Millcreek even more unique, being a township of the second class is its size. Its population is almost 55,000 people now, and they have a large operation, and that's amazing that 3 people would act as an administrator as well as try to function as the governing body. And it's just most of the other townships in Pennsylvania that have working administrators or working supervisors are much smaller.
Yeah. So in this opening, where you three are part of Public Partners Consulting Group, and you are invited to come up to Millcreek, and at this point, Jerry, you know something about the way things have been done. I think if, as a listener, and maybe one of my first questions to you is like, well, who was functioning as the manager?
Yeah, certainly the individuals that get elected to the Board of Supervisors in Millcreek are wonderful people, but the residents up there, the process of looking at alternatives really has been going on for about 15 years. And we were the last process, the citizens started realizing, as Toby mentioned, this one of the largest second-class townships in the Commonwealth, and they were realizing the issues and challenges they're facing requires the employment of professionals. Because the 3 working supervisors come from all walks of life, they're really not trained in municipal management. So quite often what we see in these situations is where the municipal solicitor plays a very active role. And the solicitor sometimes, from our perspective, is serving as somewhat as the manager. The solicitor attends meetings representing the township. So in a way, we would say the solicitor is sort of de facto manager up there.
Mm-hmm.
Up there, I'm meaning Millcreek, which is north of Granbury. Yes.
Yeah. And certainly in all the years in local government, I am very familiar with elected officials who have a good understanding of local government and kind of like having that control. I think some managers, and when they start working with the municipality, they're alert to those particular elected officials. But in this case, in Millcreek, it's formalized. It's part of the way the structure is set up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The 3 supervisors, they get elected to be the Board of Supervisors. In their first meeting, they appoint themselves, which is the township code allows, and they each become a sort of a liaison to various departments within the township. Like Toby said, there's 55,000 people, very sophisticated township, a lot of services, and facing all the challenges communities like that face today.
Yes. And just to add to this, I was sort of shocked to learn that they're really well paid. So it's a competitive office. So we have what I think from our conversations looks more like a disconnect in terms of what the residents think that should be the priorities versus what the board is setting as a priorities. And I'm going to put this question, Toby and Michael, to also respond. What is it that was driving this dissatisfaction, if we could put it in a capsule? Why did they want to change?
One issue with the 3-member board of elected supervisors is they serve in a multiple role with respect to their duties and responsibilities. Initially, they're elected as supervisors to set policy and make decisions. And under the current structure, which second-class township code allows for, is that the Board of Supervisors not only vote on policies and decisions, but they oversee the implementation of those policies or decisions that they have made on an operational or functional level with regard to each of the respective operating departments. And in addition, they also provide this oversight of the operations as well. So they serve in a legislative, administrative, and even an executive role with regard to the current structure under which Millcreek operates, at least until January of 2028, when the new form of government goes into effect.
As an example, there's a tendency to, when, in my opinion, when supervisors are naming themselves as employees, to have that their world revolve around their daily job. An example is that their board meetings are at, as I recall, 9:30 in a.m. and the one meeting a month, and the other meetings at 4:30 p.m. It's the beginning of their workday. After they get things settled in, then they have a meeting, and then for the public meetings, that's one of the driving points that came through loud and clear to us from the folks that were elected to the study commission, was that not only the availability, but what's the priority that is. Are they listening to us? Who shows up at a meeting at 9:30 a.m. and and then it's everybody's work days wrapping up, they're commuting home or whatever, and the other meeting's at 4:30. So that in itself was just a light bulb going on for everybody. And that takes the focus away from having a board that would at least have one meeting in the evening, so which is customary nationwide, worldwide, to have meetings available to the public.
One other factor I'd like to enter into the discussion is the reality that under the current township form of government in Millcreek, they have a elected 3-member board of auditors. And the main role that the elected auditors play in Millcreek is to set the compensation for the elected supervisors that appoint themselves as employees of the township. So it provides some independence with respect to the setting of compensation for the supervisors. They don't set it themselves. The board of elected auditors set that compensation to provide some separation, so to speak. But again, the high level of salary that the municipal administrators are earning is unique to Millcreek.
Yeah. And I'd like to put just a point on this, that before we get into your part of this, Mike, in terms of the way the study commission worked, this is not a dissatisfaction in the fact that there are elected officials who are interested and involved and active in local government. I know that many professional managers do work with active boards, that this is a good thing to have a board that is active. It is not a discussion about residents who want elected officials to step away. It's just that they want the role to be clarified, if I could say it that way, and you can help me. But I think it's the clarification of the role of the elected official, and is there somebody that would serve as a professional manager? That's where the study commission is asking them some very important questions about what actually they are looking for in terms of local government structure.
I think it's fair to add to that we were the third attempt by the residents up there to drive a change in the form of government. And I think what was unique to this third time was their board of supervisors made some very difficult public policy decisions over the last 2 years that really were difficult decisions and riled up people quite a bit, that got a renewed interest on decision making in the township. So I think that also brought a spotlight on how the township operates.
Yes. Okay. And so, again, going back to some of the transparency and just the participation, the community wanting to have a more active role, perhaps, in that process of decision making. Yeah. So if we could then, I'd like for you, Mike, to talk a little bit more about how a study commission was formed in Millcreek and what that actually does. What is it? What is that about? What is a function of a study commission?
A government study commission operates under a state statute called the Home Rule Charter and Optional Plans Law. And this statute basically provides a process and a procedure under which a government study commission is created and formed. The statute talks about how the question gets put on the ballot. It can be put on the ballot two ways. One is through the governing body, in this case, the Board of Supervisors, adopting an ordinance that would authorize the county election office to place a referendum question on the ballot. Another option is through a citizen initiative petition drive, where a minimum number of signatures is placed on a petition asking voters whether or not they would like a question put on the ballot relative to one of the three questions that's in the state statute. In Millcreek's case, this process started back in November of 2024, where it was the Board of Supervisors that, I think under some public pressure, they adopted an ordinance authorizing the ballot question to be placed on the ballot in the general election of November of 2024. The outcome of the election prevailed that a government study commission was approved to be created by the voters. The other question that voters say yes or no to, in a sense, is the individuals who are running for the government study commission. The government study commission had 7 members, and more people ran than actually were seated as members. So we ended up having 7 members who were on the commission officially, but there were also, I think, 4 or 5 alternates that the commission appointed to act as not only alternates, but also to act as resource individuals. The government study commission is formed after the election is certified with regards to the results. They have an organization meeting. They elect a chair, a vice chair, a treasurer, and a secretary, and those are the officers under which the study commission will operate. They have the ability to adopt rules and regulations for the conduct of their meetings relative to parliamentary procedures, how they operate, carry out their activities. And in this case, the charge of the study commission is literally to study the existing form of government once they've been organized. And the meetings are held under the Sunshine Law. They're public meetings, pre-advertised. Minutes are being taken of the minutes of the meetings, and they're eventually adopted and become part of the record. So initially, the Government Study Commission has 9 months to literally study the existing form of government. In this case, it was the Millcreek Township, second-class township form of government. So interviews were held by Toby and I with regard to individuals that ran operating departments. We interviewed the police chief, the treasurer and director of administration. We interviewed the director of public works, and we also interviewed each of the 3-member board of supervisors and the solicitor to get a better understanding of their roles, their responsibilities, and what they did as part of the organizational structure and the function and operation of the township. Also, interviews were arranged with other townships that were similar or like townships, like Millcreek.
Yeah.
Now, what was also discovered through research is 25 townships in Pennsylvania with the most population. All but I think 2 had a municipal manager. There were 5 members on the elected board of supervisors, and they all had managers per se. 5 members, managers, and they were policymakers per se. Only 1 township out of the 25 had an elected official, supervisor, that also served as an employee. So they were compared really to Millcreek Township to show the differentiation or the distinction of Millcreek Township with regard to the 3 working supervisors, no manager. So it gave some food for thought to the study commission to look at another type of form of government. Now, the statute provides for 4 choices, 3 of which would provide for an elected executive council form of government. Within those 3, you could have a director of administration or no, or you could have a managing director. But the key is that you've got an elected executive that really has the appointment power for directors of departments, for the administrator, for the solicitor.
Yeah.
Some will require council consent, some do not. But I think the best fit that really appeared for Millcreek was the council manager form of government, which basically you have a council, and they are this policy-making, goal-setting, decision-making body. They appoint a manager. The manager manages, executes, carries out the decisions of the elected body. There is a firewall under which the statute provides for that the governing body is strictly goal setting. The manager is strictly executing those decisions. There's limitations on the ability of the governing body to go directly to employees, going over the manager's head, so to speak, to give direction or to go through some type of process that the manager really should be involved in. So that basically, again, within that 9-month period, they're doing a lot of studying of existing forms of government as well as looking at optional forms of government around the states.
If I could
Pardon me?
just take a break there, Mike, because I want to, can you hold that? But just put a pin in that thought, because you've said a lot here, and I want to just quickly bring Toby in on this. In the organization work I do, I perked up as soon as you started talking about the interviews. And I'm imagining, because I know from my own interviews, whether it's inside the organization or whether it's from the community, it's not as if people have a really clear, crisp understanding of how local government works or the functions of it. I'm very curious what you learned from the interviews that helped you to formulate some direction in how you were going to work with them, maybe what you were going to recommend. Can you share anything from that interview process?
To start, then Toby can pick up. Dynamics that I learned from the interviews was that you have individuals, department heads mainly, that they report to one of the 3 respective elected supervisors / municipal administrators. And after a 2-year period, you have elections, and sometimes those individuals will change in terms of different people coming into office, or that the responsibilities of the elected supervisor / municipal administrator will change, and they'll oversee different departments. So that one thing I did notice is that there wasn't ongoing relationships or consistency with regard to the supervisors slash municipal administrators overseeing specific departments, where I think you needed some stability and longevity with regard to that working relationship. And again, with the supervisors that acted as municipal administrators under respective departments that were divided up, as has been reiterated here, they come in basically as lay people without any direct expertise within managing a municipality and the specific functions and technical aspects of those various operations and departments. So that's one dynamic that I learned that I think was very interesting to lend itself to supporting a council manager form of government, where again, you've got a policy-making body and you have a manager that executes and carries out the policies and has stability and longevity with regards to the working relationships that the manager has with department heads, and the department heads are direct reports to the manager.
So would you say, Toby, that in your interviews that you could feel that from the inside that there was some issues that came directly from this lack of maybe continuity, if you will, between the municipal administrators and the departments that they oversaw?
Actually, the perspective that I took was with each interview, the 8 that we did, was to see the competency of each person in their role. And I was impressed with the department heads, the chief and the others. A little bit of interesting, the interview with the public works director was in the right place in a truck. We rode around in an extended cab truck with, and one of the supervisors joined the ride. It was sort of I think, an open discussion about what was going on. But I was sitting in the passenger seat beside the driver, the public works director, who was driving. It just, his competency was there, but there was, I hope I don't say something wrong. So it's the obvious part is that as far as each of the supervisors' competency, they're learning up as they go, and they don't have a trained administrative background, so they're just all of those interviews to me showed, and the interview with the solicitor showed that where's the administrative bastion that's going to be able to answer questions or get the answers or know the answers and act in a truly administrative capacity. I'll make a brief comment that back in 1870s, in the American Revolution leading to the Constitution, it was pretty easily figured out that there needs to be an executive branch as well as a legislative branch, and they're not one and the same. So, I mean, it's just, I think it was more of a sense of that we didn't try to pin department heads back about saying, what do you think of your boss? But it was just, again, you could tell there was a vacuum of continuity.
That's a very good way to put it.
And if I could add,
please, Jerry.
If I could add something there too, with Toby and Michael conducting, it's important to note that the Board of Supervisors were not supportive of this effort. So it was a difficult environment for the employees, in terms of asking them the hard questions, because their bosses were publicly opposed to what was going on.
Oh my gosh, very difficult. I'm glad you raised that. So we have some resistance, and I'm going to come back to that. I would like to have Mike continue. He was just at that moment saying that really what seemed to be apparent was that the council and manager form of government would work well. And you're going to begin, with Toby working with the study commission to talk about that and why. Why was that particular form coming to mind as an appropriate fit?
Well, where I left off is that around the 6th month, the government study commission needs to make a decision whether or not they want to vote no change or they want to have a vote for change. In this case, the study commission around the 6th month voted for a change. And within that 6-month period, presentations were made to the study commission on the 4 forms of government that they had to choose from. Again, 3 of which where you have the elected executive, the governing body, council, and in one case you could have a director of administration. In another case, you would not have a director of administration. And the third choice, again, was just having a managing director with a smaller governing body. Those did not seem to fit within a township model. So it seemed to be a better fit with the council manager form of government. So the study commission, after its due diligence with conducting interviews of different sorts, came up with, we want to pursue a council manager form of government that is prescribed under the optional plans and under the Home Rule Charter and Optional Plans law. When I say it's prescribed, it's relative to that there's a choice of a 5-member governing body. You could have 3, you could have 7. You certainly have a manager that is part of the organizational structure. And you also have the opportunity with regard to the elected officials. They came up with a 5-member board because it offered more diversity and more representation throughout the township. But also, you've got the option to pursue the elected treasurer or appointed treasurer. In his case, they continued with the appointed treasurer that was already in place. So the decision was made to go with the council manager form of government. For the remaining, 10, 11 months, that took us to 18 months maximum time, we continued to do due diligence with research and with interviewing individuals, mainly from council manager forms of government that were townships. And again, I'm using the term council because that's the term of a governing body that's in the statute. Even though there was some discussion about let's keep it Board of Supervisors so that the voters don't feel as though they're voting for something like a city council or a county council, but we remain faithful to the statute to continue to call the governing body a council. So again, you end up with a council manager form of government. So a final report was drafted over the next several months that took us to about 14, 15 months.
Michael, excuse me, but we started actually for the election for the study commission was in November
Right.
of 24. So we actually, the 15 months is for a home rule charter, 18 months. I mean, I can't, but we didn't spend that much time.
Right. I stand corrected. Thank you.
And you're the guy on it, Michael. See, but that's the thing. You know what? If one of us would say something out of, if we thought we were the element of this equation, one of the 2 other guys was going to say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we all had unique contributions.
Under the optional plan that the Governance Study Commission chose, 9 months is provided to come up with a recommendation of change or no change. They came up with change, and a final report was written collectively by the group as well as myself, Toby, Jerry. We all contributed to the final report, and a public hearing was held on the final report. But within that time frame in which the final report was presented to the public, you have up to 60 days before the election to make changes to that final report. There were no changes made to the final report after the public hearing and after different viewpoints were taken into consideration. So the final report was submitted as originally authored and drafted, and election was held last November of 2025, where it resoundingly was approved by the voters. And it's planned to go into effect in January of 2028 to allow an election cycle in 2027 to occur, to allow for the governing body to go up to 5 members. And that will take place again in 2027 in a municipal election. And the 2 additional people and any new supervisors, they will take office January of 2028.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to stop you there. Now the drama is coming in, so I'm getting very excited here. But we got to talk about the secret sauce. What I want to get to is this could not have happened without some very specific kinds of interactions and dynamics within the commission. And you all 3 were a part of that. But I'd like to direct this question to Toby, because I feel from our preliminary conversations that, Toby, you had a lot to do with helping the commission to understand maybe how to operate, or some of the questions just in terms of what a mature commission looks like and how you kind of guided them towards this goal of making a recommendation. Can you talk a little bit about your interactions and work with the commission?
Sure. Just to quickly take rolling the camera back a couple of months. It was when the good folks from Millcreek met with us in Cranberry in the conference room, and they know Jerry, and they knew Jerry was involved with a nonprofit consulting group, Public Partners, and they from that point, that 2.5 hour or so meeting, when it's just a disgorging of information by the several people that drove down from Millcreek and us. We shared thoughts, and I have to use the word. It's kind of one of my favorite words. A symbiosis immediately began, and that this group of people, and then as it turned out, then I ended up meeting with the ones that were elected and the alternates in a subsequent meeting. That relationship just grew. And I really, as I think we discussed a little bit before, Nancy, that this was a nurturing process. That's kind of one of my favorite things to do as a manager. Managers nurture. They nurture what the relationship even could be, so far as the relationship between the community and the board, individual members of the community and so forth. So now we have this group of people, the 7 who actually were elected, and the other 5 used another word that I like, and I think it's a perfect word for this situation. This was serendipity, to have all these people coming from some professional people, some people, mostly professionals, but people that were just so focused on trying to have their government be more open, more inclusive, and do good things. And there's a lot of good programs are there, but do it in a way that more people are involved, and it's not a kind of a secret sauce of their own on one side. So, and have someone that's a professional that can help. They understood the profession, and they wanted to make sure that it was clear to the public once they were seated, started having the meetings, that they were not predisposed to any one particular form. And I saw evidence, my partner saw evidence of that the 12 people, they really they wanted to know what would be the best way to accomplish this separation of powers and getting things done in a great way. Another part, just a tiny bit of a structure within a structure. What happened then is that since Jerry and I have been long-term managers, and Mike has the long-term experience of helping managers, we immediately, it just happened again. It just plain as could be that there should be some committees formed, the committee of the whole, where the board would meet and have an agenda, cover certain items. For example, like Michael's presentation on the different forms of government, that we'd have different aspects of the whole process going through in a step-by-step way. Committee of the whole. And then there was the structures committee that was set up to investigate these structures, looking at other communities, which they did, looking at themselves. A finance committee was actually set up, and a public education and outreach committee. So each of these committees, in the sense of good government, so the Sunshine Law wasn't violated. There were 3 members of the committee, but other members, the alternates could come, anybody else could come, and I'm in, but the committee itself was each of 3 members. And they just, all of a sudden, I began to realize that, hey, what we're doing, they're practicing to be a council. And then we explained that to them. And here's what we do. You hired these advisors. This is what we do. And that process just kept evolving further and further. They ran into some challenges, which I think is something I should probably address. The opposition to this was very defensive, and they made attacks. At one point, I was called a liar during the meetings and so forth, but we didn't lie. We can't. That's another thing that we showed, that the administrative branch of the government is expected. We are absolutely, it's a position you are expected to be candid and tell the truth and be factual and be pragmatic. And again, this symbiosis became more evident with the members of the board, who they showed their patience with being attacked, and how they were humble, yet a group of people that were really with it people and just so focused on just trying to make things work better. And that's how they dovetailed on this. And it came to be, after all this work, the various committees, each taking their part, and then the committee of the whole, that they all came prepared. They asked questions, and we just had great interaction the whole way through. And one last comment about the attacks. A member would call, or one of the chair, each of us, Michael and I in particular, would have a committee that we were the advisor to that specific committee. And the outreach committee said, one member of the committee said, we have to fight back. And I said, no, you don't. He said, what do you mean? I said, if I said this once, I said it 50 times, keep the high ground. And we even said that publicly sometimes. And just to say that, we are here to present information. We are here to talk about what can be, how government has functioned in many, many cities and townships and counties all throughout the country. So it's just stay focused on that. And Jerry used the word passionate. The passion of this group was so strong, and their knowledge and all these great traits that they have. Again, back to serendipity. That's kind of a summary of the nurturing process.
I'd like for you all to describe, to the extent that you're comfortable, just who these people were, like what walks of life, what parts of the community did they come from, what were their either professions or interactions in the community.
If I could chime in there, most of them did not know each other when they got elected to the commission. So they came there really the first time to get to know each other. And if I can add, there was a financial gentleman from the insurance, an auditor from the insurance industry, the CEO of the Erie Water Works, federal statistician, an IT professional. Who else did we have up there? An insurance professional,
engineer,
a business person who had two stores.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to say too that, to echo what Toby said, they were under a microscope, and it might want to say, as practicing managers, hostile environment. And it would have been very easy for them to get into trough and attack back. They stayed the high road the whole time. And many times people would come to their public meetings and say, "Oh, you're going to reverse that action of the Board of Supervisors." They never played that game. They said, "We're looking forward. We're not looking backward." And very much kudos to them that echo what Toby and Michael said, they really coalesced into an amazing group of people that cared purely about the future of Millcreek Township.
And they had the traits that we in the management community, Barry and I, each of us nearly 40 years, of actually, just they embrace these qualities of patience and courage, and there's just traits that you want to see on a board, and the empathy that they showed. It was an amazing group of people that wanted to run, and a very astute electorate that got them in this position so they could actually do something about what they wanted to do to change their government.
I think from a listener point of view, if you're thinking about doing something similar to what Millcreek has done, I would want to know what to expect. Like, where did that resistance come from? Is it mostly political? Is there a fair or neutral assessment that you could make of what was it that made people attack?
I can probably say, since I've known the Millcreek people for many, many years, and to become a township supervisor up there was not what Toby and I are used to be, a part-time legislator. It was a full-time, compensated, excellent benefits, pension, health care for long-term after you were there for 2 terms. So we were challenging the system. I remember one of the supervisors way back, 10, 15 years ago, called me about about finance. And he said, "Jerry, what do you do?" I said, "I'm the township manager." He said, "What is that?" And he said, "Are you trained in this?" Really a great guy. I've known him. He had no concept of professional municipal management. So I think, and the guys that I know that became township supervisors in Millcreek, many of them rose up from the township. They worked in the public works department, the code enforcement department, and they saw becoming a township supervisor as a career advancement. So it was that environment. I think we were challenging, people got elected to well-compensated, although they were really getting elected to part-time township supervisors work, but they in turn appointed themselves, and the general population just felt that was the way it was supposed to be. So we were really challenging that culture. Toby and Mike, you agree? That's
absolutely.
Yeah, the first place to look, if a community is wanting to embark on this quest, is going to be, what's the current governing body's attitude? If it's likely going to be pretty evident, then you got to start turning over rocks, and that's what the interviews can help you do, certainly, and figure out what is going on. But there's always, I could really say that there's always going to be some organizations, there's going to be some groups, there's going to be, whether it's political parties or it's community associations, neighborhood associations, there's always going to be that element probably just about any community of any size that's going to decide to try to change their form of government. And just to sort of get your pulse and it's start, your research, each community is going to be slightly different, but I think the boilerplate is going to be about the same.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for the audience to also know that this is not completely a done deal at this point. You're in a transition phase, so there's still some challenges to see you through. And I do wonder if you feel that the message of sort of what a professional manager can bring, because that's going to be a part of this transition process. Is that correct? You're going to be looking at, or they are going to be hiring a professional manager. And I want to just ask if you feel that there is some clarity around what that means and how that's going to be different.
Let me take the first shot if I can. It's just jumping out of me. It's a big wish that the study commissions as an entity, their existence passes on the election that is held, and they cease to exist. I think there's, at least in an advisory way, it probably wouldn't take an amendment to the law that governs this, but to have what happens when the vote goes, we're going to create a new form of government. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot to follow the next recipe, because the three of us are here as our contract ended in November, and so the study commission's looking at each other. What do we do now? I think I had the expectation that there would be, and there has been now some pulse of that they're trying to take it, but there's no way to formally nurture the process, a transition, and unless the community can speak loudly to have a transition committee that's going to represent. And the governing body is up for the challenge of having their jobs taken away from them, to have a transition committee that's going to just emulate the work that was done by the study commission and the beautiful work in this case of how to set up a council manager form of government.
And go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
Thank you. One thing I'd like to add to what Toby stated is that in support of the new form of government, in the statute, there is a recitation of the duties and powers of the manager with respect to that new position that's going to be instituted come January 2028. Now, during the transition period, the final report does mention a transition committee and the composition of the transition committee, which recommends to the governing body, the Board of Supervisors, that there be 7 members, 4 of which be members of the Government Study Commission and or alternates, 1 member of the Board of Supervisors, and 2 residents. So it comes up with, again, 7, 4 of which could be a majority. Point being that 1 member of the Board of Supervisors was recommended so that that individual basically can't control a majority of at least 3 other people. Also, the charge of the transition committee is to draft an administrative code, which is a supplemental document to the optional plan of government that the voters adopted. So it gives substance to the form of government that is going to be instituted come January of 2028. That is normally a responsibility of the transition committee, which normally would be done by someone of our level, like Toby, Jerry, and my level, or a solicitor could take that on. So our sense is that we believe that the solicitor will be the party to draft the administrative code. And in that code, it will outline the duties and powers of a municipal manager, that our hope is that provisions remain faithful to what's in the statute that is, again, required by law to be what the manager does, at least at a minimum.
But again, the very unique situation here, 3 people compensated, lots of benefits, and working people. And in any case, no township of the second class that wants to make this move to council manager form of government they can appoint who they want to the transition committee. They can disregard that recommendation altogether. And it's a matter of what is the political environment, the community's perspective about what happened here with this vote. And so it was a laudatory recommendation, Michael, you and I made with the number of people and so forth, and they accepted. But who knows if the Board of Supervisors isn't ready to buy in on something like this, they don't have to. They can appoint who they want.
And they are. The Board of Supervisors has taken on the task of the transition committee. And the solicitor's, it appears he's playing a critical role. And we know the role the solicitor played for decades up there. So it's a little bit of a concern to those that wanted a change. I do know that former commissioners are staying heavily involved. They're attending all the Board of Supervisors meetings and
Study commissioners.
the study commissioners, yes, are all are trying to advance in an informal way the intent of the study commission's final report. There are printed newspapers up in Erie like many communities don't have, but they're still maintaining that media relationship individually as residents of the township. And it's really professionally addressing the board at meetings, not in a hostile environment, to remind the board of what the final report said. And the board's been gracious back to them, but as Toby said, there's no doubt the Board of Supervisors are not happy with the direction the residents voted to go. So we're all a little concerned about what happens in the administrative code.
Well, I think, Jerry, that was the question I wanted to ask you and the others. Just, what are you watching most carefully right now as you follow this story?
Well, that's something that we all spoke about, the poison pills. Part of the job then will be for the transition committee to recruit their first professional manager. And any professional manager is going to want to look at the administrative code. And what goes into administrative code? Is there a lot of micromanaging going on? They'll have a manager. Michael said by law they have to, but is the manager's hands being tied so he or she will unable to really act as the township manager? So I think those are the things they're looking at. They're looking at the professional qualifications. The final report said professional and competency. Anyone can define that the way they want. So their attention on who's potentially, how they're going to recruit for the manager, and what's in administrative code to support the role of a township manager.
There's a lot of good news. Nancy, the good news to me outweighs what we're talking about now, which is the denouement and a climax of this to how this is going to be implemented. Anyone looking at this needs to know that there can be a lot of positive about the way the commission is formed, how the commission does its job to get to the point where, again, I use the word again, an advisory or a nurturing process. In our case, you have to test your own waters. But this is the hard part is so that I would say that anyone doing this should be advised that see to it that there's somebody left to carry the baton after the study commission's work is over.
Yeah, and a kudos to the Board of Supervisors up there too. They now have a meeting once a month in the evening at 6:30. So they even start to make some changes already. The individual former study commission members are personally meeting with the elected officials up there, trying to work with them in a non-confrontational way. But like Toby said, the professionalism and passion that we saw in the study commission's performance is continuing afterwards as individual residents of their township.
Great. Also, I'd like to add that the quality of the new officials that will be elected to what's going to be a 5-member board of council, the quality and the support that these new members, as well as hopefully existing members, will give to the new form of government. Once the administrative code is adopted, which is adopted by ordinance, once these folks are in place in 2028, if the administrative code veers or swerves from what would be traditionally objective and professional outline of duties and powers of a municipal manager, it can be rectified by adopting an amendment to the administrative code.
Amen.
There is opportunity for rectification, so to speak.
Yeah. I would like, if I may, take my podcast host hat off and put my consultant hat on and run by something that's on my mind, and then you can let me know what you guys think about this. When I listen to you talk, it really comes down to the fact that the first professional manager who steps into this role is going to be tested to the nth degree. When you have a political situation, you have to withstand that pressure. The biggest point, what you're making, Mike, is that you don't make changes that are going to go backwards. But somebody who knows that my job is to ensure this transition mirrors the wants and needs of the community.
It looks
What do
like Toby's ready to go, but I would say
No, I'm
how
good.
how that person will react is depending on the majority of the board of supervisors that
Yeah.
takes office.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there's a
I
lot
agree.
of there's a lot of attention up there now on who is going to run in 2027. If they get a board of supervisors majority who support the recommendations of the final act, that's where it comes into a strong manager coming in there to begin reshape the culture of that township. I think
Yeah.
that's probably the best way to say it. But it would be probably a short-term manager for the first year or two. Toby, you're smiling there.
No, I'm just trying to think how to try to be clever for a second. I mean, a combination of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Superman or woman. It's just you're going to have to be able to have some thick skin and experience. There's no question. We already visited this subject a bit, and some of the study commissioners said, "Well, what do you think? How many years' experience do you think we should ask for?" And I said, "Well, more than 2." But somebody with a seasoned person, they're gonna if they ask us, "What do you think the manager should make?" And we gave them some ideas we did it's going to be in the high 100s. It should be because of the amount of working population. Of course, that'll be a source of criticism, but the Erie County manager is in the 100s. But I think there might be a couple of people that are already looking, that are seasoned managers that are really up for, I don't want to say up for a fight, but say
understand the challenges.
They're really, that's right. They're really, the passion extends to the point of, I can deal with a couple of bumps and maybe a lot of bumps, but part of my passion is, and my strength is, I can get things done, and I don't care if somebody's going to be critical necessarily of me. I can handle myself. Okay, so herself, because there are some people, and if they ask me for a recommendation, or any of us, but I know I myself is doing manager searches. I think they should advertise nationally.
Yeah. There is a thirst by the residents for professional leadership.
Yes.
So they will go to an environment with a lot of public support for positive leadership. That's what they really want. Positive, forward thinking.
62% of the people that voted said that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good point.
Well, I hope that with your guidance in the background, and I know the contract is no longer, maybe that will be reactivated again, but I do think that it's very easy to be naive about what can happen to the manager once they get there. I've watched the managers tussle with this. They get in there and there's behind the scenes politics that start playing. And it's very difficult when what was it out of recent Generation on the Rise? It's like you're one elected official away from a hostile work environment. I mean, it can really... There's a lot of things that can happen that you have to understand your role from the beginning, and it can be unpleasant. And maybe that's not true in the long run. And maybe there'll be, I think, whatever happens in this next election will be telling. So you'll see something. It'll be more clear to you. Yeah. But I hope in the background you make sure that they don't just hire the idealistic, person who looks great to everybody, but maybe doesn't have the depth of understanding of what happens once you're in and the knives come out.
Because of the culture change in moving to a manager, in a sense, you only get one choice or one opportunity to do it right.
Yes.
Yeah. Good point.
Yes, that's a great place to end. I have just enjoyed my time with all of you so much. And this is a drama that I will be following, and I know many others will. If there's anything else that we can do with this podcast to help bring light, I just think there's a lot to be learned from this experience. So please keep in touch, and we can do another episode if you'd like at any point.
Thank you. We
bring on any additional people you want to bring on to talk. So
we can bring a former commission member on. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for highlighting this. It is a great example of democracy in action.
Amen.
And people passionate about their local government. They love Millcreek, the residents, and they want nothing but the best for Millcreek.
Power to the people.
Well, the smartest thing they ever did was ask you three to come up. They had no idea. They were getting the best.
Well, I think when Toby and Michael went up, I think they go, what did we get ourselves involved in? But it came out okay, right, guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
It did.
Power to the people.
I have never, I've been welcome to all the communities that have asked a consultant, a public partners person to show up. And I'm sure you, Jerry and Michael can echo this, but I have never been any more warmly received and befriended by a group of people. This group of people from the get-go. Jerry, you must have given us a good recommendation or something. I mean, they walked into the room wanting to hug us, and it did not end there when the commission was eliminated by law. So I'm glad to hear, Jerry, that you know those details about that it lives on. Thank God. That's great.
Well, they've been friends for several decades. They'll continue to be my friends. And so we talk a lot.
Yeah. Jerry, you are the one who brought this story to me, and I just thank you so much. And I thank you for your friendship and long years of associations.
Well, thank you for highlighting Millcreek, Nancy.
Nancy,
To all of you then.
if there's anything you want to pick my brain about or something like that, thank you so much for doing what you do and for this opportunity for us to talk about this. It's great. You're wonderful.
It'd be great. I would welcome that. Thank you all so much.
Take care. Okay.